I wasn't in the mood to leave the house that evening. The power had been out for hours, plunging the entire neighborhood into a sort of eerie silence interrupted only by the occasional hum of portable generators. It was one of those sweltering summer nights when even a simple task, like sitting on the porch, felt unbearable. But then I saw him, an older man struggling to push a generator up the steps of the house 2 doors down. I didn't recognize him. I'd lived in this neighborhood for almost 5 years, and while I wasn't exactly best friends with my neighbors, I knew most of them well enough to wave or chat briefly about the weather. This guy was new, or at least he was to me. For a split second, I considered staying where I was. It wasn't my problem, right? But something compelled me to get up, walk over, and ask, "Need a hand?" The man, whose name I later learned was Roger, gave me a tired smile. I could use all the help I can get. What started as a simple task, helping him set up his generator, turned into a conversation that stretched well into the night. Roger had just moved into the neighborhood 2 weeks earlier, but the power outage had made it nearly impossible for him to unpack or even properly settle in. He was a retired schoolteacher who had relocated to be closer to his daughter and her kids. His wife had passed away the year before, and this move was supposed to be a fresh start for him. We sat on his porch in the dim glow of battery-powered lanterns, talking about everything from his years as a teacher to my frustrations with my dead-end job. Roger had a way of listening that made you feel like your words mattered. He wasn't just waiting for his turn to talk, he genuinely cared about what you had to say. The next morning, the power was still out, and I decided to check in on Roger. He was sitting outside with a cup of coffee, looking out at the street like he was waiting for something. When he saw me, his face lit up. "I was hoping you'd stop by," he said. That was the beginning of what turned out to be an incredible friendship. Over the next few months, Roger and I grew close in a way I hadn't anticipated. He became a sounding board for my frustrations, offering advice that was wise but never preachy. In turn, I helped him navigate the challenges of settling into a new community and even taught him how to use his smartphone, a device he had owned for years but barely knew how to operate. Roger had this uncanny ability to see potential in people. When I told him about my job at the call center and how much I hated it, he didn't just nod sympathetically. Instead, he asked me, "What would you do if money wasn't an issue?" The question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me that before, not in a way that made me believe they truly wanted to know the answer. "I guess I'd write," I admitted. "I've always loved writing, but it feels like such a pipe dream." "Why does it have to be?" he asked. It was a simple question, but it stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, Roger encouraged me to start small, write for myself, for fun, without the pressure of making it perfect. He even suggested I join a local writers group he had heard about at the library. At first, I was hesitant. The idea of sharing my work with strangers felt terrifying, but Roger's quiet confidence in me made it hard to say no. So I went. That writers group turned out to be a turning point for me. For the first time in years, I felt like I had found my people, a community of creative, supportive individuals who were just as passionate about storytelling as I was. Roger became my biggest cheerleader, reading every short story I wrote and offering feedback that was both thoughtful and encouraging. When I finally worked up the courage to submit one of my pieces to a local magazine, he was the first person I called when it got accepted. "You're on your way," he said, his voice brimming with pride. Looking back, it's incredible to think about how much my life changed because of that one act of kindness during the power outage. Roger didn't just help me rediscover my passion for writing, he taught me the value of taking risks, trusting others, and being open to unexpected opportunities. When Roger passed away 2 years later, I was devastated. But his influence on my life remains immeasurable. To this day, I carry his lessons with me, both in my writing and in the way I approach the world. Sometimes, all it takes is one small gesture, a helping hand, a conversation, or even just a willingness to step outside your comfort zone to set something extraordinary in motion. Roger taught me that, and I'll forever be grateful for the day I decided to walk over and ask, "Need a hand?" Second story. It all started with a wallet I found lying on the ground near a coffee shop. It wasn't the first time I'd picked up something someone else had dropped, but there was something about this particular moment that felt different. Maybe it was the way the wallet looked, worn leather, clearly used but well loved, or the fact that it was on my way to an interview that I was already late for. I remember pausing, debating whether I should even bother. My gut told me to pick it up, and as I flipped it open, I saw a driver's license with the name Thomas Reynolds. The address wasn't far from where I was standing, and I figured I'd drop it off after my meeting. The interview was a disaster. I stumbled over my words, failed to make the right impression, and left the office knowing I wouldn't be getting a call back. Frustrated and defeated, I almost forgot about the wallet until I sat down in my car and saw it on the passenger seat. I sighed, thinking, why not? At least I'll do something good today. The address led me to a modest house in an older neighborhood. The kind where kids still rode bikes on the street and neighbors waved to each other. I knocked on the door, half expecting no one to answer. A man in his mid-50s opened the door. He looked at me with cautious curiosity until I held up the wallet. "Are you Thomas Reynolds?" The relief on his face was instant. "Oh my God, yes. I've been looking everywhere for that. Thank you." What I thought would be a quick exchange turned into a conversation. Thomas invited me in for a cup of coffee, insisting it was the least he could do. I hesitated, but eventually agreed, figuring I had nothing better to do with the rest of my day. His home was cozy and filled with pictures of a family that clearly meant the world to him. Over coffee, he told me about his life. He'd recently retired from his job as a firefighter and was adjusting to a slower pace of life. His wife had passed away a few years earlier, and his 2 kids had moved out of state. "I guess it gets lonely sometimes," he admitted, staring into his cup. I told him about my failed interview and how I felt stuck in a rut. I wasn't happy with my job or my lack of direction, and the weight of it all felt crushing. "You know," Thomas said after a pause, "sometimes life throws us curveballs to steer us in a better direction. You might not see it now, but this might be one of those moments." I wasn't sure why, but his words stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, Thomas and I began meeting regularly. He'd invite me over for coffee or lunch, and we'd talk about everything, from his firefighting days to my struggles with figuring out what I wanted in life. One day, he invited me to join him at a local community center where he volunteered teaching basic life skills to at-risk teens. He thought I might enjoy it, but I was skeptical. I didn't think I had anything valuable to offer. "Just come," he said. "You might surprise yourself." To my shock, I found myself enjoying it. The teens were tough and guarded, but I saw pieces of myself in them, unsure, frustrated, searching for something more. Thomas had this incredible way of connecting with them, earning their trust through patience and genuine care. Week after week, I kept going back, helping with workshops and sharing my own experiences. Slowly, I started to feel a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Thomas became more than a mentor, he became family. He taught me how to fix a leaky faucet, how to grill the perfect steak, and, most importantly, how to believe in myself. "You have more to give than you realize," he told me one afternoon as we repaired an old bookshelf in his garage. "You just need to stop doubting yourself." When Thomas passed away unexpectedly a year later, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. But even in his absence, he continued to guide me. I took over his role at the community center, determined to honor his legacy by helping others the way he'd helped me. Looking back, it's incredible to think how a lost wallet led to all of this. Thomas didn't just change my life, he helped me find meaning in it. Sometimes, the smallest actions can have the most profound impact. I'll carry that lesson with me forever. Third story. It all started with a text. Well, technically, it wasn't even my text. My phone buzzed early on a Saturday morning, and when I groggily checked it, I realized it wasn't for me. My best friend Kyle had left his phone in my car the night before after we went out for dinner. The text came from someone named Jess, and it simply read, "Hey, just checking in. Are we still good for today? Let me know when you're on your way." Kyle lived about 2 hours away in a small college town where he worked as an adjunct professor. He'd taken the bus home after our night out, which explained how his phone ended up in my car. When I realized how important this Jess meeting seemed, I called Kyle from my phone. He didn't pick up. The text buzzed again. "Kyle, it's kinda urgent. Please don't ghost me on this." I debated my options. I could ignore it, but knowing Kyle, he'd probably need his phone back sooner rather than later. We'd been friends since high school, and I knew he wasn't the most organized guy. After grabbing a quick breakfast, I decided to do the responsible thing and drive out to return his phone. The first strange thing happened about halfway through the drive. I stopped at a gas station to fill up, and as I went inside to grab some snacks, Kyle's phone buzzed in my pocket. This time it was a call. The caller ID showed unknown. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Is this Kyle?" The voice on the other end was calm but firm, like someone used to being listened to. "No, but I have his phone," I explained. "He left it in my car, and I'm driving out to give it back." There was a pause. "You need to be careful," the voice said. "Just tell him not to do anything rash. And make sure he listens." Before I could ask what they meant, the line went dead. I reached Kyle's place around noon. His apartment was in an old brick building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. I knocked a few times, but there was no answer. A neighbor across the hall popped their head out. "You looking for Kyle?" they asked. "Yeah, I've got his phone." "Is he home?" The neighbor frowned. "Haven't seen him since yesterday afternoon. He left in a hurry." Now I was officially worried. I tried calling Kyle's work and a few mutual friends, but no one had heard from him. His phone buzzed again, this time with an address pinned in a nearby city, about 30 miles away. It came from Jess. The message read, "I'm here. Don't flake on me." I didn't know what else to do, so I decided to head to the address. It was a stretch, but maybe Kyle was there. The location turned out to be a small cafe on a busy street corner. I walked in, phone in hand, and scanned the room. That's when I saw her. Jess. She was sitting at a table near the window, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She spotted me and waved hesitantly. Hey, I began awkwardly as I approached her table. "I'm not Kyle, but I have his phone. He, left it in my car." Her expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Where is he?" "I was hoping you could tell me. I haven't been able to reach him." Jess hesitated, then leaned in closer. "Listen, I don't know who you are, but Kyle and I were supposed to meet because, well, let's just say he got involved in something he shouldn't have. I'm trying to help him." "What kind of something?" I asked. She glanced around nervously before whispering, "He didn't tell you?" "No. I just know he's missing." Jess sighed. "There's a storage unit on the outskirts of town. He mentioned it last time we talked. If he's not here, he might be there." Against my better judgment, I agreed to check out the storage unit with Jess. When we arrived, the place looked deserted. Rows of identical, rusted metal doors stretched out under the harsh afternoon sun. Jess had a key, which she used to unlock unit number 27. Inside was a mess of boxes, papers, and old furniture. On one of the tables, there was a small stack of documents labeled with Kyle's name. Jess sifted through them, her face growing more alarmed with each page she flipped. "He was looking into something he shouldn't have," she muttered. These are bank records. He mentioned something about a professor at his university funneling money into a private account. He thought it was just embezzlement, but what?" She handed me a file. It contained names, dates, and wire transfers, money being funneled overseas to some very suspicious organizations. "That's why he disappeared," Jess said. "He must have gotten too close to the truth." What followed was a chaotic blur. Jess and I spent the next few hours trying to piece together Kyle's movements. We called his co-workers, drove to a few more places he'd been known to frequent, and even filed a missing person report. By nightfall, we got a break. Kyle called his own phone from a payphone, and when I answered, his voice was shaky but alive. He gave us an address in a remote area and begged us to come get him. When we arrived, he looked exhausted but unharmed. He explained everything, how he'd stumbled upon the financial records, how he'd been threatened by the professor's associates, and how he'd been hiding out to avoid them. The three of us drove straight to the police that night. The investigation that followed led to multiple arrests and a scandal that rocked Kyle's university. Looking back, I still can't believe how a simple favor turned into such a whirlwind adventure. Kyle and I joke about it now, but I don't think either of us will ever forget that wild weekend. And as for Jess? She and Kyle are still close, though their connection remains as much of a mystery to me as the rest of the story.